Story 1. 3 miles off the trail. I've spent over a decade hiking through old-growth forests, mapping invasive species and monitoring wildlife. Solitude doesn't bother me, in fact, I prefer it. No chatter, no traffic, just wind through. Leaves and the soft crunch of moss underfoot. That's why I didn't think twice when my supervisor assigned me to a solo survey in a remote section of the Eldridge Preserve. 40,000 acres of forest, few marked trails, and even fewer visitors. It's the kind of place where you can walk a full day without seeing another person. That morning started like any other. Cool air, filtered sunlight, the scent of damp cedar. I hiked out with my gear, checking off survey markers and logging plant species on my GPS. Around noon, I stopped to eat just a granola bar and some dried fruit. It was quiet. Not eerily so, just still. A thick kind of silence that made the occasional rustle of leaves sound exaggerated. I remember thinking the canopy above me looked unusually dense, almost like it was hunching down over the forest floor. Around 2:30, I checked my GPS and paused. I had drifted nearly 3 miles off the nearest marked path. Not ideal, but not unheard of either. I've wandered off course before and always found my way back. I adjusted my heading and started moving northwest. That's when I heard it, my name. Not shouted, spoken, calm, measured, just one word. Evan. It wasn't echoing or distorted. It was clear, like someone had stepped right up behind me and whispered it into my ear. I turned so fast I almost slipped on the moss. Nothing. Just the same trees, the same filtered light. My first thought was that my radio might have picked something up, but I hadn't brought one. It was a single-day assignment. No comes needed. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I'd misheard a bird call, or maybe I was just jumpy from the isolation. Still, the hairs on my arms wouldn't lie down. I kept walking. 10 minutes later, I stopped again. Not because I heard anything this time, but because I felt something, a change. The air was different, heavier, like the humidity had tripled in a matter of minutes. The kind of pressure you feel before a thunderstorm. Except there were no clouds. I looked up. The canopy didn't seem so high anymore. The trees looked closer, denser. I hadn't noticed how many of them were leaning inward, like they'd grown toward something central. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. It smelled off like soil and metal. Not blood exactly, but something sharp. I forced myself to keep moving, even though my legs felt reluctant, like I was wading through wet sand. Then another voice. Not a word this time, just a sound, a low exhale. Almost like disappointment or patience. That's when I realized something. That made my stomach drop. I hadn't seen a single animal all day. Not a squirrel, not a bird, not even an insect. I hadn't even heard any. Just wind and the occasional groan of old trees shifting. I stopped to check my GPS again, and it was frozen. The screen showed my last location, but wouldn't update. I reset it. Nothing. The time stayed at 2:43 p.m., no matter what I did. I turned in a slow circle. The trees were too similar. I couldn't tell which direction I'd come from anymore. Every path looked like the last. I marked a tree with my knife, just a small X in the bark, and walked in what I thought was a straight line for 5 minutes. Then I saw it, the same X, same depth, same angle. I hadn't moved at all. I stood there staring at that tree until I noticed something else. There was a second mark. Below mine, fainter, older, a single horizontal line. It looked like it had been carved years ago, then partially healed over. It hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. I hadn't even seen a single marked tree all day, and now here were two carvings, one old, one new, overlapping. The silence broke with a whisper. You came far. It didn't sound hostile. It sounded tired. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mouth was dry. My jaw clenched. I just turned and walked in the opposite direction. I didn't run. Running felt wrong. Like the forest was waiting for me to panic. I kept my pace steady, heart pounding, eyes fixed ahead. I walked for what felt like hours, even though the light barely changed. No trail, no landmarks, just trees. I tried to use the sun's position, but it never seemed to shift. Eventually, I came upon a clearing. Perfectly circular, maybe 30 feet across. Dead center stood a single tree taller than the rest, bark darker, leaves motionless even in the breeze. Around its base were dozens of carvings, initials, dates, symbols I didn't recognize, all faded, all weathered. Except one, fresh, my name. I didn't scream. I just backed away one step at a time. Then I turned and walked again. No plan, no direction, just motion. When I finally stumbled out onto a gravel service road, the sun was low and my GPS blinked back to life. It said it was 7:12 p.m. I was less than a mile from the ranger station. No one believed me when I told them I got turned around. They joked about forest madness, offered me water, and told me to get some sleep. I never told them what I saw or what I heard. But sometimes when I'm alone in a forest, I still hear it. My name. Low and deliberate. Like the trees are remembering me. If anyone else has heard their own name spoken clearly in the woods, please tell me I'm not alone. Please. Story 2. Voices beneath the pines. I don't usually keep journals, but after last weekend, I've started writing things down just in case I ever need to remind myself that something really did happen out there. Or maybe to convince myself that it didn't, I went up to the foothills near Mount Rainier alone. That's not unusual. I'm a field ecologist, and I've done dozens of solo hikes collecting soil and root samples from low-traffic preserves. I prefer places where the only voices are wind and insects. But this time, the silence wasn't just silence. It felt like something listening back. The first day was uneventful. I reached the plateau by late afternoon, set up my small tent under a sparse patch of tall pines, and took a few preliminary samples. I even made notes about the texture grittier than expected, a little damp despite the dry weather. There was a faint scent of metal too, like rusted wire. I figured it might be a mineral deposit nearby. I slept early. Woke once around midnight. The trees were whispering leaves, shifting just enough to make you think of voices. But I knew better. I've spent enough nights outdoors to know how wind plays tricks. I rolled over and drifted back to sleep. The second day, something shifted. The air felt denser. It wasn't colder, just heavier. I had this weird pressure behind my eyes, like when you're too deep underwater. My GPS flickered for the first time, just a brief stutter, and I lost the trail markers for a bit. Still, I gathered what I needed, then returned to camp by sunset. That night, I didn't sleep as well. Every time I was close to drifting off, there'd be a small noise, a twig snapping, a soft thud like footsteps on pine needles. I got up twice to check, but saw nothing. No animals, no wind. Just the black outlines of trees and the dense, unmoving air. At 3:12 a.m., I heard it. My name, just my name. Nothing else, soft, drawn out, like someone calling me from beneath the roots. It wasn't an echo. I know what echoes sound like. This came from below, not behind, not the trees, not the trail. Below, like it seeped up through the soil. I froze in. My sleeping bag. Tried to rationalize. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe it was some weird auditory hallucination caused by isolation. But then I heard it again, closer. I unzipped the tent with shaking hands and stepped out barefoot. The ground was cold, slightly damp. The smell of rust was stronger now. The pine stood tall and absolutely still, no wind. But the pressure in the air felt almost physical, like something thick brushing against my skin. I called out, just once. My voice sounded thin, wrong, like it didn't belong in that space. Silence. Then another whisper, not my name this time, but something I couldn't understand. A low, drawn-out murmur threading through the trees. It circled. I swear it. Circled around me. I backed toward the tent, but the ground felt strange soft in patches, uneven in others. Like there were voids beneath the topsoil. I didn't fall, but each step felt wrong. Like walking across skin. I stayed awake until daylight, every muscle tense, heart hammering at every rustle. When morning came, I packed up faster than I ever have before. But the strangest part wasn't the voice or the pressure or even the whispering trees. It was what I found at the edge of my camp, a hole, not deep, maybe 8 inches wide, 2 feet down. Like something had dug up from below. There was no dirt mound. No claw marks, just disturbed earth perfectly round. And in the center, half buried, was a single shoelace that looked like mine. Same brand, same faded gray. But both of my shoes were on my feet. I hiked out in complete silence. The woods didn't whisper anymore. No rust, no pressure. Just the occasional bird call and the crunch of my boots. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I haven't slept much. Not because of nightmares, but because I keep hearing something at the edge of sleep. My name, again. It's never loud. Just there. If anyone else has heard something like this, especially out near Rainier, please tell me. I need to know I'm not the only one. Story 3. Unknown campfire. I had been alone for 3 days, hiking and filming along a lesser-known ridge. Outside Big Sur, the plan was simple capture untouched landscapes for a low-budget documentary on forgotten trails. I deliberately avoided the main campsites to preserve the natural soundscape. No cell service, no rangers, and according to the forestry map pinned to my dashboard, no maintained paths in a 5-mile radius, which is why when I smelled wood smoke just after dusk, I froze mid-step. It wasn't the distant scent of an old fire pit. It was fresh, close. There was a bite of cedar and something else sweet, like burning orange peel. I stood there, holding my breath, waiting to hear movement. A squirrel, maybe? A bird settling into a branch. But instead, I heard laughter, not booming or exaggerated. Just low chuckles, a ripple of shared amusement. 2 or 3 voices, maybe, male, calm. There were no trails marked anywhere nearby. No reports of camps or fire allowances in this area. Still, I veered left toward the glow filtering through the trees. I didn't call out. Something about the voices, something in the casual rhythm made me cautious. They weren't joking or singing or drunk. They were murmuring like people who've been talking all day and just kept going through the firelight. The underbrush was thick, but the trail, if you could call it that, opened slightly as I crept closer. My boots barely made noise on the damp forest floor. I ducked beneath a low branch, and then I saw it. The fire, small, controlled, neatly encircled by stones, flickering with that familiar amber glow. Flames swaying in the stillness, but no one around it, just the fire. And my backpack. I didn't move at first. My body locked up in that cold, full-body way, like when you think someone's behind you but can't look. My pack was right there, leaned against a log like I'd just stepped away. Same scuff on the left pocket, same black carabiner on the zipper, but I'd left it in my tent. I was sure of it. I always double-check my gear before leaving camp. I forced myself forward, slowly, the way you approach a wild animal half expecting it to vanish or lash out. The fire crackled softly. There was no food, no chairs, no signs of someone having sat there long. Just my backpack and the faint scent of something overcooked in the coals. I glanced around. No footsteps, no rustling in the trees, and no laughter anymore. I reached down, hands trembling slightly, and unzipped the main pouch. Empty, completely. Even my small camera wasn't there. The outer pockets were zipped shut, but light too light. Someone had taken everything and brought just the shell of it here. Like a display, like bait. A sound snapped behind me, a single dry twig. I turned fast, scanning the dark between trunks. Nothing, not even a breeze. I backed away, instinct flaring in my chest, but I didn't run. I left the backpack there and returned to my own camp, a half-mile uphill. My gear was still in the tent. My actual backpack, full, untouched. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my tent with the zipper half open, knife in hand, listening. Once, around 3 a.m., I heard it again, laughter. Distant, but closer than it should have been. I held my breath for so long, I nearly passed out. Then silence. Too long. Like even the insects were waiting. At sunrise, I went back down to that clearing. I don't know why. Maybe to prove I imagined it. Maybe because some part of me needed it to be explainable. The fire pit was still there, scorched and cold. Stones blackened with ash, but no backpack. Not mine, not anyone's. I marked the location on my GPS, though it didn't save. The file corrupted later that day, and the footage from my hike. Gone. All my SD cards recorded static, as if the cameras had been running the whole time, but pointed at nothing. Sometimes I wonder if someone or something wanted me to see that fire, or needed me to. I haven't gone back to that trail since, but I still dream about it sometimes. About the crackle of flames and the soft, quiet chuckle of someone just out of sight. If anyone else has experienced something like this, please let me know. Am I going crazy? Story 4. Second footsteps. I booked the cabin with a single purpose. Disappear for a while. No phone, no internet, No noise. Just me, the woods, and whatever silence I could find in the Adirondacks. I told a few people where I'd be vaguely, but I didn't want company. I hadn't realized how much I'd started craving my own absence until the city lights made me feel nauseous. So I drove north until cell service dropped out and the road narrowed to gravel. The cabin was basic, no electricity, just a cot, a stove, and windows that sweated cold when the sun went down. On my second day, I hiked the ridge trail behind the cabin. The path wasn't marked, and the undergrowth slapped my legs with that damp, early autumn chill. There was no wind, no animals moving, just the steady crunch of my boots on the old leaves. I was about a mile in, maybe more, when I noticed it, the sound of a second pair of footsteps. They were behind me, close, matching my pace, just slightly out of sync like an echo that didn't quite belong. I stopped walking. The sound didn't. It took one more step, just one, and then silence. I turned around quickly. Nothing. The trail curved behind me, hemmed in by thin trees and that kind of soft twilight mist that blurs the edges of everything. I called out, just a low hello. That felt foolish the moment it left my mouth. No answer. No wind. I held still for maybe a minute, listening so hard I started to hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I told myself it was probably some animal, or my own boots hitting unevenly. But when I walked again, the second sound came back faint, deliberate. Like someone trying to match my steps, but just missing the beat. The rhythm was wrong. It wasn't rustling or random. It was patterned. I stopped again. This time, the other steps continued for a few beats longer, as if they hadn't noticed I'd halted. That's when something shifted. It felt like whoever or whatever was back there was reacting, but not in real time. I turned around again, slower this time, scanning the slope and tree line. Still nothing, but the hairs on my arms were stiff. I don't spook easily. I used to run trails alone all the time, but this felt different. Like being watched by someone who doesn't care if you know. I picked up my pace, half walking, half jogging back toward the cabin. The second footsteps followed, faster now, mimicking my rhythm again, but slightly delayed. Crunch, 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 just a fraction of a second behind me, like a lagging shadow. By the time I reached the fork in the path that led down to the cabin, the sky was full of that cold purple dusk. I paused to catch my breath, and the second steps stopped instantly, too instantly, as if they were listening. For my breathing to change, I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Silence. Then just once a single crisp footfall behind me. No breath. No movement. Just one step. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. It wasn't courage. It felt more like obedience. Like something in my body decided that looking would make it real. I moved again quickly, ignoring the branches whipping against my arms. I didn't hear anything else for the rest of the walk, but the silence itself felt wrong, too quiet. Like the woods were waiting. I slammed the cabin door behind me and stood there for a long time, hand on the knob, breathing hard. I stayed, up most of that night, oil lamp burning low. The forest outside pressed against the windows, the way snow does, heavy and muffling. Around midnight, I heard a soft crunch of gravel just beyond the porch. Just one step. I didn't go look. I didn't move. I just listened. After a minute, I realized I could hear breathing. Not mine. Slow, measured, just beyond the wall. Then it stopped, and nothing more. In the morning, I found nothing outside. No prints, no marks in the dirt. I told myself I'd imagined it sleep deprivation, nerves, isolation. But when I stepped onto the ridge trail again, something was different. About halfway up, I noticed a set of boot prints next to mine. Not exactly parallel, more like following. Slightly smaller than mine, and the spacing was off, like someone had been trying to mirror my stride but didn't quite get it right. I didn't hike far that day. That night, I slept with the lantern on. Sometime around 3, I woke up to the faint sound of footsteps circling the cabin. Slow, methodical, always behind whatever wall I was nearest to. I lay frozen, heart pounding, listening as the sounds moved, crunch, pause, crunch, until they stopped right at the back window. Then silence again. No breathing this time, just absence. I left at dawn. I didn't even clean up. I just packed my gear, got in the car, and drove until the trees gave way to houses and the cell towers reappeared. I've told myself it was all in my head, the isolation. Be quiet. But sometimes when I'm walking down the hall of my apartment, I swear I hear it again. That second cadence, just behind me, always half a step late. If anyone else has experienced something like this, please let me know. I don't know what to believe anymore. Story 5. Shelter marked in red. I've worked with the Park Service for almost 7 years, now mostly solitary assignments, mostly in quiet stretches of land few people visit. I like it that way. The routine is steady, catalog invasive. Species, note growth patterns, mark new outbreaks. Hike in, hike out. I always bring my own lunch, keep to myself, and log everything on a battered old tablet that still somehow holds a charge. That day was no different until I saw the red mark. It wasn't paint. At first, I thought it was a smear of lichen or maybe some weird sap, but the hue was too clean, too deliberate. A circle, roughly the size of a fist, drawn directly onto the bark of a sugar maple, just off Trail 14C. It was lower than eye level. Someone had placed it there purposefully. I knelt to get a better look and noticed faint footprints nearby, recent enough that the leaves hadn't settled back over them. I felt a ripple of unease, but chalked it up to the eeriness of being alone, always alone. By early afternoon, I had deviated slightly off trail to investigate a cluster of Japanese stilt grass choking a clearing. That's when I saw it. A makeshift shelter, 2 faded tarps strung between trees, tethered with paracord and branches. It wasn't unusual to find evidence of squatters or long-term campers, especially in more remote zones, but this one felt wrong. It wasn't messy or lived in, it was staged. There were no signs of a campfire, no food wrappers, no gear. Just the tarps, the slight sag in the middle where water had once pooled, and a single item placed carefully in the center. A photograph, folded twice, weighed down by a thin, snapped twig. I hesitated before picking it up. My fingers were trembling slightly, and I could hear the distant flutter of a bird overhead, but even that sound seemed too sharp, too precise in the silence. It was me, the photo. Me standing at the trailhead of the same park, wearing my usual field vest with my name badge clearly visible. I don't know when it was taken. I don't even remember that exact outfit, but there was no denying the time stamp scribbled in faint pencil on the back. April 18th, 24, 6 days ago. That was the day my field logs had mysteriously failed to sync. I had brushed it off as a network glitch. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked around slowly, holding the photo like it might burn me. The trees were still, the canopy barely letting in light. It was mid-spring, yet I suddenly felt cold. My mouth went dry. I called out just once. Not a name, not a question, just a noise to push against the silence. Nothing answered. No echo, no squirrel darting away. Just stillness. I left the photo where I found it and stepped backward out of the clearing. I didn't run, I wanted to, but some part of me feared making noise more than staying still. On the way back, I marked the trees in reverse, subtle scratches with my knife to track my path. I didn't want to end up back at the shelter by accident. That night, back at my assigned cabin, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the angle of the photo, how whoever took it must have stood close. Very close, and the twig used to pin it, how deliberate that felt. I checked the door lock twice, then dragged a chair in front of it. At some point, I dozed off. Around 3:12 a.m., my trail cam app buzzed with a motion alert. I had one unit set near trail 14C. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the image thumbnail, heartbeat in my throat. The photo loaded slowly. First shadows, then branches, then a blur of red paint. No, fabric. Someone walking, partly obscured. The resolution wasn't great, but I could make out one detail. They were holding something that looked like a tarp, or folding it. By morning, the camera feed had gone dark. I drove out to the access road but didn't hike in. Not that day. I told my supervisor I had twisted my ankle. He didn't ask for proof. I don't think he really listens anymore. Most of the rangers out here are tired, disconnected. That's how things get missed. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. But then I remember the photo, my face, my clothes, the timestamp. I never took that photo. I never stood for it. Someone else was there, someone who watched, who waited, who left it for me to find. And now, every week, there's a new red mark. Not always on the same trail. Sometimes it's just a smear, other times a perfect circle, but I don't report them. I don't take pictures, I just keep walking. Have you ever seen something that was clearly meant for you, but no one else? Something that shouldn't exist? If you've ever found a mark, a message, or a memory you didn't make, please let me know. I need to know I'm not the only one. Story 6. Signal in the rain. I wasn't supposed to be there that late in the day. The forecast had been clear, and I'd started the hike early, wanting solitude and silence more than anything. Olympic National Park always gave me that. But around 4 p.m., the light shifted. That was the first thing I noticed, not the storm clouds, but the quality of light itself. It felt ... thinner, like a filter had been laid over everything. I was still a couple of miles from where I planned to turn back, and I remember thinking, I'll just go a little farther. That's always the mistake, isn't it? When the rain started, it didn't fall. It hissed, like it was being whispered into the trees from somewhere higher up. I brought a rain jacket, but within minutes, it was useless. The trail turned to sludge under my boots, and visibility dropped so quickly, I lost all sense of direction. That's when I spotted the outcrop, a low, overhanging mass of moss-covered stone tucked back behind a thicket. It wasn't much, but it was something. I ducked under, heart pounding from more than just exertion. It took a while to register the quiet beneath the shelter. No birds, no wind, not even the usual creaks from the forest. Just the soft, slow drip of water hitting earth. I remember checking my phone, more out of habit than hope. No bars, just the time 5:16 p.m. and 27% battery. I was about to put it away when it buzzed. One message. The screen just said, Sam. That's my name. No number, no contact, nothing. Just that. I stared at the screen for a long time. At first I thought maybe it was from my sister. She knew I was out hiking, but how would it come through? There was no signal. I even toggled airplane mode to refresh. Still nothing. Just my name hanging there like someone had whispered it into my phone. The next sound didn't come from the phone. It came from outside. A soft, sloshing noise, rhythmic, wet. At first I thought it was runoff from the hillside, maybe a little. Stream forming with the rain, but it had a pattern. A deliberate pause between steps. Like footsteps, slow, dragging, getting closer. I held my breath. My rational mind was screaming that it was just a deer, maybe an elk. But something in me knew it wasn't. I could hear the suction of something, heavy pulling free of mud with each step. Slosh, pause, slosh, closer. I turned off the screen of my phone. The light felt data exposed. I didn't want to look. I kept my back against the cold stone, trying not to move. The smell of wet moss and earth filled my nose. Then a new scent, metallic, faintly sour, like rust or blood. I heard breathing, not mine. Too loud. Too wet, like lungs filled with fluid, straining against themselves. Then silence. No steps, no breath. Just silence so thick it made my ears ring. I stayed frozen for I don't know how long. Minutes, probably. Long enough that I started to believe it had gone. Long enough that I convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. I peeked out. Nothing. The trees were blurred behind. The veil of rain. The path was empty. But there, in the mud just beyond the overhang, were prints. Not boot prints. Wider, bare, and deep enough to hold little pools of rainwater inside. I told myself they'd been there already, that I'd missed them on the way in. But even as I thought it, I saw them feel freshly made. I needed to leave. I stepped out, back onto the trail, phone in hand, trying to orient myself. The prints led away down the path. I turned the other direction. Didn't care if. It wasn't the way I came, I just needed to move. But after only a few steps, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Same thing. Sam. This time, the screen froze. I tried to shut it off. It wouldn't respond. The screen flickered, then stayed black. And then vibration. Long, continuous. Like a heartbeat that didn't end. I dropped the phone. I didn't want to hold it anymore. I ran. Branches clawed at my jacket. Mud sucked at my boots. And every few seconds, I thought I heard something behind me. Not running. Just moving. Slowly. Like it didn't need to hurry. The trail forked, and I didn't recognize either direction. I picked left. I don't know why. Maybe it felt less wrong. I never saw anyone. Not that night. I finally stumbled onto a fire road and followed it until I found a ranger station. It was empty. I waited there until morning. no one ever came. I filed a report. The ranger didn't take it seriously, said maybe I got turned around, said storms mess with reception, that weird glitches happen. I wanted to believe him. But when I got home, my phone was still dead. I took it to a repair shop. They pulled the data. No messages. No recent activity. But one outgoing draft unsent. Just my name typed over and over again. If anyone else has been alone out there, if something called you by name, please say something. I need to know it wasn't just me. Story 7. Tent unzipped at 3:11 a.m. They say the desert is silent at night, but that's not true. It breathes slowly, deeply. Especially in places like the Escalante Wilderness. I'd been hiking solo for 4 days. I'm ex-military, trained in harsh terrain and harsher surprises, but I seek solitude now, not adrenaline. That night, I set up camp near a sandstone bluff, miles from any marked trail. The silence out there isn't peaceful. It's too complete. The kind that lets your ears fill with your own heartbeat. At 3:11 a.m., I woke up. Not startled, just suddenly alert. There was no sound at first. Then came the softest hiss, like nylon grazing nylon. It was the zipper on my tent door. I froze. The air inside was still dry. My hands were under the sleeping bag, fingers curled. I hadn't moved yet. I waited, eyes open in the dark, listening. The zipper moved again, slow, hesitant, like someone unsure whether they were welcome. I reached out slowly and clicked on my flashlight. Beam steady, I unzipped the flap fully and stepped out in socks. The desert night hit cold. My breath clouded. In the beam, there was nothing. Just rocks, shrubs, and silence. But the sand outside told a different story. My boot prints were there, leading to the tent. And another set, smaller, deeper, facing mine. No tracks leading in or away. Just the prints, standing like someone had been waiting. Watching, I crouched down to study them. The size was off, not child-sized, not quite adult either, narrower than average. The prints had toe impressions. Bare feet. The weight distribution was strange, too much on the balls of the feet, like someone had been leaning forward. I scanned the perimeter with the light, pulse in my throat. I called out, "You lost?" My voice came back to me. Rung, smaller than I expected. Nothing moved. No rustle. No call back. I stayed outside for 15 minutes, maybe more, circling the tent, looking for any sign of someone watching from the dark. But the sand remained untouched. No wind, no shift. Eventually, I crawled back in and zipped up, pulling the knife from my pack to keep near. I lay there, eyes open, counting seconds. Sometime after 4, I drifted off. At dawn, the prints were gone, smoothed over like they'd sunk into the earth. I told myself maybe an animal stepped there oddly. Maybe I imagined the direction. But I kept thinking about the precision of that zipper. That sound. Too slow, too careful. Not like something tugging or pawing, more like fingers. That morning, I packed up fast. No coffee, just movement. As I rolled up the tent, I noticed something I hadn't the night before. The inner mesh pocket where I kept my lighter and compass was unzipped too. I don't remember opening it. Nothing was missing. But the compass was flipped, needle stuck between north and east. I tapped it. It didn't budge. Back on the trail, I moved fast. I checked my 6 more than usual. Every few miles, I turned suddenly, expecting what? Someone barefoot in the dust? No one came. But the air never warmed. Not that day. Like something around me hadn't lifted. I kept hearing things, though. Not voices, just patterns. A branch snapping twice, then nothing for an hour. Then a soft footfall behind me, always out of sync with my own. That night, I camped near the river. I placed a tripwire using spare cord and tin cookware. I didn't sleep, not even with my back against the rock wall. The zipper never moved again. But around 2:40 a.m., the tin can clattered once. Just once. No footsteps, no prints, and the compass still stuck. I made it out the next day. My truck hadn't been touched. The digital clock blinked 3:11 like a glitch. I stared at it until it reset to 7:43. That moment has stayed with me. Not just because of what I saw or didn't, but because of the calm I felt then. The wrong kind of calm. Like someone had made a decision and I just wasn't part of it. If anyone else has camped in Escalante and experienced something like this, please tell me. I need to know I wasn't the only one they watched. Story 8. Silhouette on the trail camera. I didn't plan to stay the night. The initial idea was to do a sweep of the northern section of the reserve, set up the new motion-triggered cameras, check a few animal tracks, and be back by dusk. But the drive took longer than expected, and the late October sun didn't give me much room for error, so I pitched the tent. I told myself it was practical, efficient. I'd done field work alone before. I wasn't afraid of the dark, just cautious. I remember thinking, even as I zipped up the tent, that the woods felt oddly still that night. The air had that cold, metallic bite to it common before a frost. Everything around me seemed wrapped in invisible dampness. The leaves were no longer crisp. They felt soft underfoot, like the woods were slowly absorbing them. I set up the last trail cam on a pine facing the clearing where I parked. A simple infrared model silent, automatic, almost invisible. Just a tool. I didn't even bother to check the angle again before heading back to the tent. I had no idea what it had captured. I didn't sleep well. There were no loud noises. No obvious threats, just the absence of familiar sounds. No crickets, no owls. Once or twice, I thought I heard twigs snap, but they were faint, easy to dismiss. Still, I lay awake for most of the night, eyes open in the dark, hand resting on the flashlight by my sleeping bag. At some point, I must have drifted off. But if I dreamed, I don't remember it. The morning was gray and heavy. Fog clung to the ground in patches, curling low over the brush. As I packed up, I noticed condensation inside the tent more than usual. Everything was damp to the touch. My boots were cold, like they'd been left outside longer than I remembered. I didn't think much of it. Not until I started reviewing the SD cards back at the field station. Most of the footage was predictable raccoons, a deer, one blurry shot of what might have been a coyote. But when I loaded the camera from the pine near the clearing, something caught my eye. There was a single file timestamped around 2:13 a.m. The video was 4 hours long. That alone was unusual. The camera should have stopped recording once motion ceased. I assumed it was a glitch, then I watched it. At first, it was just the clearing. The soft grain of infrared light illuminated the tree line, faint outlines shifting as the mist moved. Then, about 20 seconds in, a figure stepped into view. A person. They walked in from the left side of the frame, slow, deliberate. They stopped dead center in the exact spot where I had pitched my tent. They didn't move. I watched for a full minute, expecting them to crouch, turn, walk away something. But they stood completely still, head slightly tilted, arms at their sides. The camera recorded for 4 straight hours, and they didn't shift once. Not a sway. Not a twitch. Just that dot stillness. I paused the video, replayed the entrance. The way they walked wasn't right. Too smooth, like someone gliding rather than stepping. And their proportions, they seemed normal at first, but the longer I stared, the more something felt off. The limbs were too long, or maybe too thin. There was no detail, just a silhouette, no face, no clothes I could make out, just shape. And yet I was sure it was human. At 6:17 a.m., the figure stepped backward, still perfectly aligned with the tent's location, and vanished into the fog, the same way they had arrived. I checked the timestamp again. That was 10 minutes before I woke up. I went back and checked the tent site. I found nothing unusual, no footprints, no signs of someone standing there for hours, but the earth was soft. It should have left some imprint. I even tried standing there myself, timing it. After just 5 minutes, my shoes left. Clear indentations. 4 hours should have carved a crater. I didn't tell anyone right away. Who would believe me? Even when I showed a friend the video, they said it was probably a glitch. Some kind of loop, maybe a prank. But I know what I saw. I watched it live. I know how the camera works. It doesn't loop. It doesn't lie. That night, I had a hard time sleeping again, not because I was scared exactly, more because I kept thinking about that stillness, the precision of it. I kept wondering, what if they weren't looking at the tent? What if they were listening? Waiting. The footage is still on my laptop. I've watched it a dozen times, and it never gets easier. There's something wrong in the way that figure exists in the frame. Like it's not part of the scene, but layered. On top, like it wasn't there to be seen, but to be remembered. I haven't gone back to that site. I haven't even moved the camera. If anyone else has seen something like this, someone just standing silently where you slept, please tell me. I need to know it's not just me. Story 9. Whistling without wind. I hike alone. Not for any profound reason, just a preference. Something about the rhythm of my own breath, the crunch of soil under boots, and the silence of trees that don't expect conversation. Last weekend, I set out for a 2-night trek through the Green Mountains in Vermont. I planned a loop trail with elevation, but nothing too extreme. Just me, my pack, and the forest. It wasn't supposed to be memorable. The first day passed like many others before it. Early fog gave way to mid-morning light. I saw no one after. The first few miles, that was fine. I made camp near a ridge just off trail, pitched my tent, boiled water, read a few pages by headlamp. The wind was completely still. Not silent, there were forest sounds as usual, but still. No breeze, no rustling. The air felt pressed down like it had weight. The sound began just before dawn. I hadn't slept much. The stillness made every small noise feel amplified. Around 4 a.m., I heard it. 4 notes. A low whistle, not musical, not melodic, just 4 slow tones, spaced evenly. It sounded like it came from the trees above my tent. My first thought was wind through branches, but nothing else moved. Not a leaf. I waited. It repeated. 4 notes again, then silence. I unzipped the tent and stepped out. Nothing. Dim light on the horizon, but the forest was shadowed. I turned slowly, listening. The whistle didn't come again. No bird song, no chipmunks, not even insects. Just my breath and the dense hush of tall trees. I shook it off, packed up, and started hiking. Early, hoping the strange mood would fade with the sun. But the whistle followed me, not constantly, only every hour or so. Always the same 4 tones. Sometimes far behind me, sometimes to the side, never in front. At first I thought it might be someone playing a trick, maybe another hiker who'd gotten ahead and doubled back, but I hadn't seen any sign of people since the first day. And the terrain wasn't easy to navigate off-trail. It didn't make sense. At one point, I stopped completely and waited for the sound. 10 minutes passed. I didn't move. Then 4 notes, softer this time, from farther off. I almost turned around, almost, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. It's just some bird call, I thought. Maybe a thrush I didn't recognize. Maybe some tree warping in the heat. I kept moving. By late afternoon, the clouds had thickened. It never rained, but the light dimmed unnaturally fast, like dusk was arriving 2 hours early. My plan was to stop near a lean-to shelter by a stream. Another 2 miles ahead. I didn't feel like bushwhacking a new site. I just wanted some semblance of man-made comfort flat ground, a fire ring, maybe carvings on the wood walls that reminded me I wasn't the only one who'd passed through. About a mile out, the whistling changed. I heard the 4 notes closer than before, and then a pause, then something new. A soft intake of breath, a rough edge in the sound, like someone trying to copy the whistle with their throat, not their lips. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't the wind. It was a voice, low and breathy from just beyond my headlamp's reach. Whistle back, I froze. I didn't turn, I didn't speak. I remember my legs locking into place, as if even a shift in weight might attract it. Whatever it was, the silence returned. But now it felt loaded, tense. The forest wasn't quiet anymore. It was holding its breath with me. Eventually, I moved again. I didn't run. I didn't even speed up. Just one slow step at a time, eyes fixed forward, headlamps scanning only the trail ahead. My ears were useless. Every crack of a twig could have been my own footfall. I made it to the shelter around sunset, empty, but still standing. I didn't light a fire. I didn't cook. I just sat inside, back to the wall, headlamp off. The sound came again at full dark. 4 notes, followed by the same whisper, whistle back. I don't know what it wanted. Or still wants. That's the part that bothers me now. Something that speaks, that mimics, usually expects something. Maybe a response. Maybe permission. Maybe a signal. I left at first light the next day. Didn't even finish the loop. I took the maintenance. Rode back to the nearest ranger station. Didn't say anything. What would I say? The woods are quiet again. But sometimes when I wake up at night, I think I hear it outside my window. Just barely, just a suggestion. Have you ever heard a voice copy you when you're alone? If you have, did you answer it? Purgantar a Chat GPT Story 10. Cabin that wasn't there yesterday. I was 4 days into my solo hike through the Smoky Mountains. It wasn't supposed to be a soul-searching trip or some wilderness cleanse. I just needed to unplug. No signal, no meetings, no forced smiles. The days blurred into one another, damp earth and pine needles underfoot, the hiss of wind slipping between trees. I had my route mapped, GPS marked, and I stuck to it like a ritual. But when I emerged into a clearing late that afternoon, something was off. Dead leaves crunched under my boots, and there it was neatly nestled between tall spruces, a small wooden cabin, one that wasn't there yesterday. It was too perfect. Not rustic or abandoned, but clean, untouched. The boards were pale, honeyed color, freshly sanded or sealed, maybe, and the windows were spotless. No smoke, no mailbox, no footpath leading to it. Just sitting there like it had been dropped from the sky. I paused at the edge of the clearing. Wind brushed my face. Everything was still, but the silence had teeth. I reached for my phone out, of habit, but of course no service. My thumb hovered above the screen longer than necessary. I told myself it was some backcountry ranger post or a private shelter, though deep down I knew that made no sense. This wasn't on my topo maps. No signs pointed here. Curiosity won. I approached slowly, boots sinking into soft moss. I could hear my own breath now, and the faint crunch of old branches underfoot. The air shifted as I neared the door, like walking through a bubble of warmer air, and then the smell hit me. A scent I hadn't encountered in over 2 decades, Stetson. Cologne. The same brand my father used to wear. I froze. The door wasn't locked. It creaked open without resistance. Inside, the light was dim but clean. Dust motes floated lazily, and the wooden floor groaned beneath my weight. A single oil lantern sat on the table in the center, surrounded by 4 chairs, all neatly pushed in. As soon as I stepped fully inside, the lantern flickered on no touch, no spark, just life. The flame was steady. I didn't move. My skin prickled. That cologne smell had grown stronger, like someone had just been there, like the warmth of a hug long gone. There were no personal items, no bags, no clothes, but the space felt lived in, familiar. There was a faint ring on the table where a cup might have sat, a single thread on the back of the nearest chair, a half-rolled blanket by the hearth. Nothing dramatic, nothing overt, just enough. My fingers brushed the table's edge, and I felt a low vibration run up my arm like touching a speaker mid-song. Only I couldn't hear anything. My chest tightened. I backed up a step. The lantern didn't flicker. I turned toward the door, suddenly sure I shouldn't be there. But before I could leave, something else caught my eye. A small, framed photo, hanging by the inner wall. I hadn't noticed it at first. It was slightly faded, black and white. A man standing in a field, wearing a flannel shirt and holding a fishing rod. I knew that shirt. I knew that smile. My father, 30 years younger. It was the photo we lost when our old house burned down. I hadn't seen it since I was 12. My knees buckled slightly, and I caught myself on the doorframe. I didn't hear anything. Not birds, not wind. The outside world had gone mute. I checked my watch out of instinct. The second hand had stopped. 3:17 p.m. I tapped the face. Nothing. My chest was pounding now, but it felt muted, like I was underwater. The air tasted metallic. I couldn't explain it. I took one step back into the room, and the lantern flickered just once, then again. Almost like it was reacting, I whispered, "Dad." Before I realized I'd done it, my voice sounded wrong in the room, too loud, like it didn't belong. I waited. The silence held. Then, from the far corner, something creaked. Not wood shifting, more deliberate, like weight on floorboards. I backed up quickly, heart slamming against my ribs, but I didn't see anyone. Just that same neat space, perfectly arranged. I told myself it was the building settling, but I knew better. My instincts screamed. I left fast, stumbling into the clearing with my pack half sipped. I didn't look back. My breath came in short gasps like I'd run for miles. I hiked until the light died, set up camp off the trail, and lay in my sleeping bag shaking. I didn't sleep, just listen to the wind. But I never heard birds again, not once after that. The next morning, I returned to the spot, just to confirm it was real, just to prove to myself I wasn't unraveling, that there was no clearing, no cabin, just trees thick and tangled like nothing had ever been cleared out. I wandered the area for hours, retraced every step. Nothing, only silence. I smelled pine and dirt, no cologne. I didn't tell anyone for years. What would I say? That I stepped into a memory that shouldn't exist? That I saw something that wasn't built but remembered? I don't even know if it happened the way I recall, but sometimes when I wake up too early, I swear I can still smell that cologne. If anyone has seen something like this out in the woods, tell me I'm not the only one, please.